Okay, so as I said in the last one here, I'm going to cut into a section where I just quickly walk through a bunch of the special interests that I've had over the years, things that have sucked me in that I'm interested in talking about in little live videos, open Q&A, like, let's talk about whatever interests you and have a conversation and, learn from each other. So, yeah, that's this. So I'm going to start walking you through a few sections. Again, not everything, but a few sections. I think what I'll do very quickly here is lay out a few of my own interests. I'll like talk through things that I have gotten sucked into over the years and give you I don't know, I mean, I can't really show you things here, and the pictures will just be freaking tiny or whatever, but I'll post pictures of different sections of my collection here so you can see just how much I get sucked into certain topics that interest me. And this is not going to cover everything. I'm leaving tons of stuff out. Never mind all the classic fiction and the fantasy fiction and the science fiction that I really got into in all my D&D books and things like that. But I'm not going to show my Latin American history or East Asian history or South Asian history or Native American history or African history. There's a ton of subjects I'm just going to leave out entirely, including even most U.S. history. There's a ton of that here. I'm just not going to bother showing things like that, because I'm trying to open up certain spaces for particular types of conversations that I think either A, will match certain interests that I have right now in terms of things that I'm working on and I'm writing on, or also things that might be topical and of interest to people here and that I know really well. They're big parts of my life. So I'm comfortable talking about those things just at length, the drop of a hat. So just first off here, okay, so you've got some South Asian religions here, as well as some skepticism, atheism, religious violence here. You've got some more skepticism and atheism here. You've got a whole bunch of paganism and polytheism. There's more of that in another photo in a bit here. There's a bunch of Zoroastrianism and other forms of Gnosticism, Manichaeism, things like that, and then bits of Taoism, Confucianism, a whole bunch of Buddhism. Then there's sections on Turkish and Central Asian history, bits on Iranian history. There's a whole ton of stuff on Jewish history and culture and on the evolution of the religious traditions. Where does it come from? How does it evolve out of its particular things? Here's some where the more the paganism stuff there is in the bottom there. And then, bits on more the development of God and the religious traditions as a whole. There's obviously a ton of Middle East stuff. So it started on the last one here, but there's more of that here coming, more the Israel-Palestine conflict, which is obviously, well, you guys may have noticed, is a pet interest of mine. So there's a whole bunch of stuff on that from tons of different perspectives. You'll notice also that my library runs all over the place. I will get tons of stuff that I don't agree with at all, but I have to understand it and where they're coming from, because I won't argue with something that I haven't actually encountered or dealt with. Okay, so tons of biblical literature, early scriptural traditions, where do things come from? How does Christianity evolve? What does it come out of? How does it relate to Judaism? The developments of Islam itself, its basic religion, early Middle East history, the history of Arab and Islamic civilizations, tons and tons of stuff on Mideast history, because obviously I teach that for a living. So there's shelves on Iraqi history and shelves on North African history and, shelves on the modern Arab world and tons of conflicts there. And then stuff on Islamic education and, reformism and things like that. There's sections here, a ton of stuff on the ancient world. So ancient Mesopotamians, Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, bits on ancient Greeks. Here's some of the Middle Ages stuff. Here's some more ancient world here, some of the Neolithic, into tons of ancient Egypt, more on the Greeks, heading into tons and tons of stuff on the Roman world, more on the Middle Ages there. And then there's philosophy, big interest of mine. Here's some political philosophy. There's, I'm actually a Nietzsche scholar. So there's 4.5 shelves on Nietzsche alone here. And then beyond that, there's a bunch of existential stuff that also ties into Nietzsche in a way, and then German idealism and the Enlightenment, and Spinozism and Kant and things like that. And then tons of 20th century thought, Wittgenstein, Rorty, Freud, bunch of historiography, a whole bunch of post-structuralism and postmodernism. This is obviously a big interest here. There's a bunch of Deleuze here and Derrida and a whole shitload of Foucault, and then classical philosophy, so ancient Greek, Roman stuff. A whole bunch of Marxist and socialist and anarchist thought here. There's a whole bunch of it's tons of different socialist thought, then tons of capitalist thought. Where does capitalism come from? How does it evolve? Tons of different stages involved in that, all different perspectives on this. So whole crap load of economics. Economic theory is a big pet interest of mine. So there's a ton on econ in different sections. And then popular uprisings and revolutions and revolutionary theory. Where does that kind of stuff come from? Then biology, anthropology, human evolution. This is a big interest of mine. Evolutionary psychology and sociobiology, psychology, how do we think, bits on sexuality, how does a lot of this stuff work for people, what do people do, basic gender issues, gender nonconformity, tons of different subcultures, the evolution of a lot of our sex and gender dialogues. European history, a bunch of general European history here. Then there's tons of British history and French history, actually tons of British history all along in here. I had a thing for ships, so there's a bunch of ocean liner type ships stuff there. There's stuff on the Cold War and military history, which isn't a huge interest, but the Cold War is. Sociology, urban studies, more European history in general, and then Russia and Sovietology. Then there's the Third Reich and Nazism. This ends up being a big interest because I study fascism and racism and all kinds of, radical nationalisms there. So obviously there's a ton of shit here on Nazis. Yeah. Nazis, World War II, Holocaust, things like that. But then that kind of takes us into studies of genocide and, then all anti-fascist discourses and policing and fascism and nationalism and radical populism, right-wing populism, a whole bunch of stuff on nationalism and how this stuff develops. And I won't talk about things that I haven't encountered. So there's a ton of stuff on Trumpism and whatnot, but there's also a bunch of books that are actually written by, far rightists, people that I would think of as neo-fascists, but try to pretend that they're conservatives. There's a whole bunch of stuff on racism, the history of racism and race thought and how that works. It's a huge interest because I fucking hate bigotry. And then how a lot of these ideas have been used to slowly twist American politics and turn this country steadily farther and farther right. Huge interest of mine. So that's a quick run through here of some of my basic concerns. All right, well, I hope that wasn't too boring, such as to spoil any possible interest you have in conversations with me, but yeah, anyway, so that's just a few of my interests. So again, I'm going to try to do some live office hours. So if you're interested in any of these kind of topics, anything related to this kind of stuff, let me know. Let's chat. Throw some comments out there. Have a good night.